So, Grandpa, so you would say, first off, you would say that there's nothing bad, but there's consequences. What does that mean? And why is there, do you not want to see good or bad?
Well, see, to say something is good or bad is to be judgmental. And once you've made a judgment, where do you go from there? I mean, it's done. It's finished. There's nothing more you can do because you've judged it as right or wrong. The matter is settled. But if you say the issue is not whether it's good or bad, because that's to pass judgment. The issue is discernment. And the issue is to discern what are the consequences of that particular choice. Not is it good or bad, but to discern what the consequences are for that particular choice. Then something can be done to resolve the issue because you then deal with the consequences and then you have a choice. Then you can see whether or not to make a different choice. So that's the reason I say it's not helpful to judge something as good or bad.
So we live in a prey world, or a world where there's superior and inferior. So if you make a certain choice, you're going to face the consequences by you're going to run across people with your same software, and you're going to run into problems. Let's say that your choice is to punch somebody. That's predator prey, right? Then you're going to get punched back as a side D or what?
Yeah. Yeah. In that world, that's what happens. It's predator prey. We were talking about these women coming over. So if you're in that world, you don't have any other options.
So, what about the example of abortion? Abortion is there?
Yeah, is abortion good or bad? See, if you say it's bad, the issue is settled. If you say it's good, then the issue is settled. You don't have to deal with the consequences because your mind is already made up. But if you say, wait a minute, let's discern what are the consequences of these different choices. There are consequences. If you choose to have an abortion, there are going to be you're postponing dealing with the consequences of the choice to have an abortion. And there are consequences of which we, at this point, don't have the capacity to be aware. But we need to respect the fact that there are going to be consequences. One of the consequences is rather immediate. You begin to feel guilty and uneasy, and you begin to judge yourself, etc. That's one of the inevitable consequences of choosing an abortion. But if you choose to keep the child, then you deal immediately with the consequences because then you've got the responsibility of raising the children if you're alone as a single parent. So the consequences are immediate. But if you deal with those consequences creatively and you take responsibility for dealing with them, then you can benefit tremendously in the long run.
You mean that by having the child, you can benefit?
Yeah.
And that's because it takes you out of yourself, and it's something that.
Yeah.
So you said something like it's a way of evading responsibility, right? To have the abortion, like.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, it's a way of avoiding and denying that there are consequences. But you see, you can't deny. There are going to be consequences of every choice that we make.
And then the consequences could even be after life, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you have an abortion. How might that manifest after life?
Well, see, that's beyond my capacity, and I think any human's capacity to be able to answer. But it would appear, and we've talked about this before, that at the time of death, there are certain things that need to get resolved. It would appear, and that if we haven't let go of our attachment to them, or if we haven't dealt responsibly with the consequences of some of our past choices, then it would appear that somehow the transition to what follows is more difficult because we still have to deal with the consequences. It would appear if we're still going to have to deal in some way, and I don't know how, but I think that's probably where this whole idea of purgatory came about, that we have to go through some kind of a process that apparently can be quite painful because it's easier, it would appear, it's easier to deal with the consequences in this life than it is in the transition.
Yeah, thoughts of that, Gabba?
No.
So we're talking about the software. So there's no good or bad person or something, or just people have different levels of software.
Yeah, see, my metaphor is the fault, dear Brutus, lies not in us, but in our software.
Because
See,
the original quote is the fault lies in the stars
yes,
in Shakespeare. But you're
yes.
saying it doesn't lie in the stars. Does it lie in the stars though? We could talk about astrology. It could maybe. No, no. Okay, but it lies in the software. Okay, what do you mean?
Well, you see, so long as you have a certain, remember this hierarchy of this impersonal, interpersonal, transpersonal, all these steps. When you're when you're operating under any of those software, any of those perspectives, any of those ways of applying yourself to life, there are inevitable consequences. So you don't have a choice. See, at this point, Trump never upgraded his software beyond allies and enemies and superior and inferior, so that every issue that he deals with is dealt with via that software. He can't think in any other way other than superior and inferior, allies and enemies. Or it's that metaphor I use about the coffee. If you dunk your donut in the coffee, it's going to taste like coffee. If you dunk your problem into your software, it's going to come out colored by your software. So the fault then, it's like with your computer. If you have an old form of software and somebody sends you a document and you try to read it with your old software, it's going to come out garbled. And it's the same way. If life sends you a signal and you haven't upgraded your software, it's going to come out as garbage. You don't have any other choice. So I'm not responsible for my I'm not responsible for my mistakes. My software is responsible for my mistakes, but I am responsible for looking at the consequences of my software and upgrading it.
So if that's the case, then you commit murder. That was your software at the time. What if you go to jail and you upgrade your software? Then
Then you will get pardoned, or you will in some way break out of that imprisonment.
Mhm.
Or it goes back to my favorite story about Sojourner Truth. She was asked, "How did you break out of slavery? How did you break out? How did you run away from your slave master?" She said, "I didn't run away. I didn't break out. I just walked away." See, she'd already walked away. She'd already walked away in her software. She'd upgraded her software. She no longer saw him, her slave master, as an enemy, as an enslaver. We don't know really what was going on inside of her, but it just became very clear to her that she was not a victim of a mean and bad slave owner. She saw herself as free, so she just walked away.
Yeah, thoughts on that, Grandpa? So someone would say you can't just walk away from slavery. There's bounty hunters and there's people who are going to bring you back, or they said the same thing about in Egypt. So the lady who was describing this thing, describing the whole event, she's saying, yeah, the Jews couldn't get out because they're slaves there, and their masters have them stuck there, and they have their swords and stuff, and you could argue the same thing about Germany. Okay, the Jews in Germany, they couldn't have left. They there were guards keeping them in Germany and stuff, and they're innocent victims. First off, is there such thing as an innocent victim, and could they just walk away?
Well, let's go back to Sojourner Truth. Now, we don't know whether all of these stories about her are legendary or whether they occurred in fact. But the story is that there were many times when people tried to capture her or kill her or somehow abuse her and bring her back into slavery. But the story is that she didn't fear that because she didn't see them as enemies. So it goes back to those three things. If we fear it and try to avoid it. She didn't fear it and try to avoid it.
Because then you're so focused on it, right?
Yeah, she didn't focus on it in fear. She didn't focus on it in anger. She didn't. She wasn't angry and resented and tried to attack it or oppose it, and she wasn't willing to give in to it and go back to slavery. She had other things that she wanted to do. She was in the flow. She was so focused on where she was going on her research and development project, she didn't have time to fear it, resent it, or embrace it. So, in that sense of the word, she remained free. And all of these, apparently, all of these attempts were made to try to drag her back in, but she just didn't. She didn't tell a story about it. They happened, but she didn't tell a story.
Yeah, thoughts like that. So we talked about that story of the Zen koan where there's the stake over the guy's head, and according to the Zen koan, this stake's over the head and he's going to get hit with it if he tries to get away or if he stays. How does he get away? And then the answer is there's no stick. And is it the same case here?
Yeah,
So
same thing. She doesn't get involved with the stick by either fearing it, resenting it, or giving in to it.
So she transcended to what? The flow?
Yeah,
Okay, she transcended this,
yeah,
and the stick was never there.
right. Well,
But-
no, it was there,
It was
but back to Einstein. Arrows of hatred were shot at him entire life, but none ever struck because he didn't live in that world. He just wasn't a part of that. His world was so big that he didn't have time or energy or attention to pay to it.
So I remember. So it's true. If you get yourself caught in a situation, your software was somehow bringing it about, and that. So I was going to ask a question in regards to this. So
See, it doesn't cause it, but it gets you engaged in it. It gets you entrapped in it.
I was going to ask a question in regards to this, and it was a good one, but I forget now. So. Any other thoughts of this, okay? Because I had a question I was going to do with this, but
You can cut this
All right.
one off.
is that good?
Yeah.